morning, folks, and thank you for joining us this morning. Welcome to another great edition of Money Truth Moments with our very own Money Whisperer, Judy Copenbarger. How are you?
I am fantastic, Carlos. Good to see you this morning.
Good to see you too. And folks, if you're just joining us for the very first time, welcome. If you're not following Judy, please do so at judycopenbarger.com. We're going to talk about our website a little bit later on in the show. But we've got a great jam-packed show. We've been really talking about taking care of our families, taking care of our kids, those that are getting ready to graduate from high school. But there's also a very important topic that we haven't discussed, and folks really want to get into. And it's, you know, we have the youngsters starting life, but we also have the flip side of that, which is also our elderly, aging parents as well too. So what I wanted to make sure that we focus, and we have plenty of time to talk about it, because this is going to be several shows, I'm sure, but we want to talk about aging parents. We want to talk about how do we take care of them? How do we prepare, for those parents that really never even started, taking care of themselves because they're always worried about their family and taking care of them also as well. So it's a lot to throw at you, but hey, we're all ears. Share with us some best practice, some things that you've seen that can also help those folks that are going through that.
Wow, there's so much to this, to taking care of your aging parents, aging siblings, and I'm in that camp right now. We're dealing with issues there. And yesterday my mom turned 93.
Wow.
So it's really fun when I talk to people about, her age and her birthday and the surprise party and all that stuff. They're like, 93, how do you do that? It's like, I don't know. I plan to do it, but it's not just having life that's extended, it's quality of life. And we're kind of in the middle of that right now with one of my older brothers, and maybe I'll have time later in the show to share a little bit about what's going on there. But when you think about caring for elderly relatives, elderly folks, there's, the physical care. You think about making sure that their medical needs are met and their day-to-day activities of daily living. They're able to get their meals, they're able to get their medication, they're able to get to where they need to go and take care of, their bodies and things like that. So there's the physical part, but there's also the emotional, social part. Keeping them cognitively active, keeping them engaged and happy, where quality of life is there. They're able to visit with people that they enjoy being with. They're able to get to family or have family get to them, and they have friends and activities that are engaging and fun. And sometimes later in life, because we're physically limited, we can't do the things we wanted to do. We can't golf the way we once did, or we can't garden the way we once did, or we can't travel the way we once did. And for a lot of people, that's very discouraging, and then there's this depression. It's like, I used to be able to do this and now I can only do this. And, it's easy to get into, what you can't do rather than what you still can do. And so there's management to that, emotional management to that. And sometimes that's part of the caregiving, that a family can step into. And then from my perspective, I'm a financial person, a legal person, not an illegal person, but so I'm always looking at the technical part of life, making sure the finances are there to have that kind of quality of life you want and do those things and get them funded, and making sure the care is there, and making sure the travel is there, and that there's choices and options in those later years. So, I'm always working with the families on the financial side, the legal side. What can we do to help protect assets and protect our elders and things like that. So there's a lot of ways when, you kind of throw this question of, how do we care for aging parents? It's like, what kind of care?
Right.
It really, you know, there's a lot of different ways to care, and sometimes they kind of overlap.
Mhm.
So how would you like to focus today?
So let's actually, one of the key things you just mentioned, and I think a lot of folks struggle with, and it kind of just blinds them a little bit, is that emotional factor, right? When you're
Hmm.
seeing your parents decline, when you're seeing your siblings decline, it's that emotional toll, I think, clouds your judgment because you can't think straight, and if you don't know what you need to do, you're hearing all millions, oh, you need to do this or you need to do that, but at the end of the day, everybody can give you an opinion. You're the one that has to execute it, right? So
Yeah.
let's start by actually just let's begin with the planning, right? I know my parents are getting older. I know, let's just say, they're already in their 70s, they're getting into their 80s. what should I be doing to prepare to take care of them? If eventually, God forbid, health problems, or they have to be hospitalized, or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? Just how do we start that conversation with them, also including them? You know,
Yeah, and I think the big point to just remember is it's different for every family. It's
right?
different for every relative. There might be emotional needs on one. There might be cognitive needs on another. There might be this whole big question that sometimes becomes a big, wide family question of housing. Where are they going to live? How are they going to live? Maybe you have a widowed parent, and it doesn't make sense now to keep that great big old house. Maybe it
Right,
makes sense to consider one of those communities as like Club Med Forever.
right.
Those places are some of those are
Yeah,
really nice. And I'm thinking, man, to do that and in the years where you still have, mobility and you're able to really enjoy that. I mean, that's a nice way to live for some people.
mhm,
Others would think that's torture. I don't want to be away from my family. I want to be their home making cookies as long as I can, at least get out the bowl and then the mixer.
yeah,
I want to be the one that's at all the soccer games and the birthday parties and things like that. So that might mean living closer to relatives, might be moving across the country and getting one of those mother-in-law quarters, buying a house together. It might be living in the house next door, to a relative for a while, or having them move in next to you or with you. In our case, we have my mother with us, and she's been with us since about 5 years after my dad died, and that was in 85. So our kids have grown up blessed to have grown up with grandma right here. And she's independent still at 93, doing her thing, independent, drives around and takes care of everybody else, and teaches piano still. She drives, a couple hours a
wow.
week, goes out to piano students, and very active, very healthy and active. And so everybody's needs are different. But when it comes to thinking about, kind of the planning side, how do we prepare for that? The first thing is to have those maybe difficult conversations. Well, mom, dad, or maybe both, right? Where do you want to live? How do you want to live? What do you want to be doing every day? Who do you want in your life every day? That's kind of the basics. What does quality of life look like for you? And then you can kind of craft from there. Logistically, where could we be? What kind of care do we need? Do we need to be in a city close to some good doctors or not? Right. So as those needs change, the answers to those questions may change. And then it comes down to if the physical care is going to be an issue, do we need to consider some kind of way to afford that long-term care insurance or life insurance that has critical or chronic benefits attached to it? Do we need to get the family set up where the family can help support, some ongoing medical conditions or some care, either in the home or in a facility? That's all part of planning. Definitely estate planning is a big deal in later years. I think in early years, you should think about it. But in later years, you start thinking about, well, we have all this stuff. Mom and dad, grandma and grandpa accumulated a lot of stuff. They have property and business interests and money and IRAs and, all of these assets. How do we make sure that that goes to the family? Maybe us, right? How does it get to the family without passing go and having to pay, half of it out in taxes or probate fees or something? And so there are things that we can do with legal documents to make sure that the assets, as they transfer to a surviving spouse or the family and loved ones beyond that, that it happens without undue delays or costs that really can be avoided.
So as we're talking about this, we've talked about obviously estate planning before, and folks, if you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. We're going to talk about judycopenbarger.com shortly, but I also want to focus on something you said. It's that long-term care planning, right? A lot of
Mhm.
folks get, because again, people don't know any better. I was guilty of that as well too. You don't know what you don't know. And so
Yeah.
people will sell you things that you may not even need, but or things that should be crucial to your, long planning and all of that, that they don't tell you about until it's too late, or oh, you missed the window. But that long-term care is very important. So can you share with us like some things that, as your parents are getting older, or even youngsters for that matter, that we should be looking at to plan for that long-term care, whether it's for illness, whether it's financially? I think that's a very important point that you just brought up.
Yeah, I think there's probably kind of a four-part answer, like A, B, C, and D to this one. And there are options. So one is to plan with the family for how that care will happen. If you have elderly mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, and there's relatives that have some means that could cover it, that's always the best way. Or if they have their own, if they planned and they have good savings and plenty of money, the risk there is you have one spouse that's not healthy and the assets are depleted for their care. And then you have a surviving spouse that now, is kind of destitute. And now we have another financial issue, for the family to deal with. But one thing is for the family to work it out without other means. That's like plan A. If you look at, option B, that would be to have some kind of long-term care insurance. And the thing about that is you have to be really insurable to do it, for it to be cost effective and really efficient for you. And it's one of those insurances that you need to put in place before you need it. And if you buy straight long-term care insurance and then you're fortunate enough to pass away sooner rather than lingering for years, which is when you would need it and get the benefits from it, then you have insurance that you really didn't get the benefit of, right? You pay all that premium and then you live 3 months, 6 months, 9 months rather than 5 years needing care. And, was that really a good decision? Hindsight. So that would be option like B. Option C would be some kind of a life insurance that has the chronic or critical care benefits to it. Like we call that living benefits. So you'll have your death benefit. So if you pass away quickly, the death benefit will go to your family, or any unused benefits would go to your family. But if you need that care, you can take it and you can use it. If you have a terrible diagnosis that, we're pretty sure you're not going to make it another year or two, you can take money out from the death benefit and use it while you're living for either alternative treatments, maybe in another country, or to add a ramp to the front of your house, make
Right.
your house wheelchair friendly, get a van that has a wheelchair lift on it, mobility issues, maybe do that bucket list trip with your family, get them all out to Hawaii or go to Europe one last time. You can use the money while you're still here. And that's usually easier to qualify for because there's all these health questions they ask you, right? It's usually easier to qualify for. But again, anytime it's insurance and it's related to your health and your likelihood to survive or to survive in a healthy way, which is really what they're betting, right? For and against with an insurance policy, you've got to do it while you're healthy. So you can't get this terrible, chronic diagnosis or terrible, outcome from your doctors and then say, let's go apply for insurance. It's not going to work. So that would be option C. Option D would be to put in place some legal planning, using legal documents with your family. So definitely everyone should have, if you're 18 or over, you should have a power of attorney for healthcare. You might hear it called a living will or a directive. It's a
Right.
document that delegates authority to another person to make medical decisions for you in the event that you can't make your own. That's very important in California, particularly. Um, so there's that. And then there's also, what do we do with the long-term questions about, where will I stay and how will I live? And if I can't communicate, who can visit me? Do I want to have a pastor or a priest come and see me if it's not looking good? What do we want to do about organ donations? What about authorizing an autopsy? Who's going to decide how long I stay on a feeding tube?
Right.
When to pull the plug? All of those things really need to be documented. Otherwise, you can't make a decision, and the government's going to do it, which means the healthcare providers. Maybe you've got good ones. Maybe you have some that are, have different values than you, but they have a protocol they have to do rather than giving the power to your family to do. And then there's also, if we're going to look at part D or option D for the care, the healthcare, there are trusts that you can use, like legal documents that you set up a legal contract that allow you to preserve the assets for a surviving spouse or for the family that survives a couple that have assets, to avoid using all those assets to deplete for healthcare costs. And some people will call these trusts like a Medi-Cal trust or an asset replacement trust. And it's a way to kind of have your cake and eat it too. It gives you options to either avoid paying some of those costs and maintain your eligibility for benefits, or to use the discounted rate available through the Medi-Cal or the Medicaid process. So there are several things that you can do, but I would say those are like the four big buckets of options to consider.
Judy, talk a little bit more about the Medi-Cal and the Medicare piece, because I think, and I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of our mature audience that watches on here that I guarantee you have no clue what that. They probably have never really looked into that too. So I think that's crucial since you brought that up.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion between Medicare and Medicaid, and they sound almost the same. Meta something, right? So, Medicare is the insurance that you have when you turn 65. It's federal, it's related to Social Security. So, it's this insurance that you have that makes sure that you can afford a hospital stay, or you can afford medications. There's Part D for drugs, that you can afford doctor's care, that you can get a walker or ambulatory, crutches or things that you need, like that you would have in your younger years. And it's a little bit more, evident and obvious and necessary when you're older. But Medicare is the insurance that covers your medical care. What it does not do is cover long-term care. So you can get, a number of days in the hospital or in a like a rehab facility, if you're recovering from a stroke or an accident or something in those later years, but it doesn't cover you if you need long-term care. So what would kick in there is Medicaid. And Medicaid is a federal program. Every state has a version of it. In California, we call it Medi-Cal. So very, all these words that sound very close to the same, very different. So Medi-Cal here covers only that long-term kind of chronic care. You think about dementia, Alzheimer's, a stroke where you're in a facility where you just really need a lot of care for probably a long time, maybe, the rest of your life. And, these other things that can come up, the ALS and all these other things that can come up later in life. So that's the insurance that covers those, but you have to be eligible for those benefits. A Medicaid or a Medi-Cal trust allows you to have eligibility, but still preserve assets. So your spouse doesn't have to be destitute to qualify for these benefits. And there's a way to do that. There's a legal way to do that. It can't be done after the fact. It has to be done. You have to, we say, plan while you can. But there's a way to do that and protect your assets for the surviving spouse where you get the benefit of the discounted rooms. It could be $10, $12, $15,000 a month to be in a nice facility, where you're getting care and being fed and get your medicine on time and they ambulate you and things like that. Well, that can deplete, a modest estate pretty quickly, maybe a matter of months, maybe a matter of years. And then what do you do with the spouse that survives, that is well? What do you do with that? So there's a way to kind of balance that, pay less maybe for that care because of the contract values under the Medi-Cal provisions. But that might be really helpful. But hopefully that distinguishing, language helps. Medicare is the insurance to cover your doctor visits and your hospital stays. Medi-Cal is the California version of Medicaid, which is long-term care.
Awesome. And folks, if you're just joining us, please make sure you watch the beginning of the show. We're really talking very deeply into how to take care of aging parents as well as siblings too, when they have a downfall health-wise or whatever on there as well. So we appreciate you guys being here. If you're not following Judy, please do so at judycopenbarger.com. And speaking of your website, I think it's a perfect opportunity. We've been sharing a lot of information, a lot of resources available. Let's talk about your resources on your website, please.
Yeah, everything we're talking about it is right there, other than what's going on in my life right now, because that changes all the time. But yeah, judycopenbarger.com has all kinds of helpful articles. There's little videos and blogs and things on there that you can access in every area of finance. So we talked a little bit about some of the legal things you can do, the insurance things that you can do when it comes to planning. All of that's there, and not just for older folks, for everybody. If you're just getting married and starting out, if you just got your first job, what benefits do you apply for, at HR? What kind of insurances do you need? What kind of retirement planning should you put in place? a 403B, a 401k, an IRA, a Roth IRA, deferred compensation package, pensions. There's all these language items out there. It's like, what are those? This is where you can learn what they are, what's available to you, and how to use them. And basically, you just learn enough to know what questions to ask. At work, what should I ask HR or the payroll department? I don't even know when they send me that big book or say go to the portal online. I don't know what all those options are. This is where you can learn enough to know what to ask and who you might need to get advice from. So the insurances, the retirement, the cash flows and the cash reserves. How much should I save? How much should I allocate in each bucket for my goals that I have coming up, for the long-term retirement coming up? If I'm saving for college tuition for my children, how much should I set aside? How much should I really help them? And how do I supplement what I could do with loans or Stafford or grants? How do I do that, right? So it's a place to go to navigate all that. And there's even a course set up called Money, Truth, and Life. It's the online mastery program. And it's courses in all 5 pillars that we're discussing of finance for small business, small ministry, and for people, just for families so they can navigate better. And we really want you to know better so you can do better. And so it's a place to go to learn enough to know what you need to know to choose between a stock and a bond, a will and a trust, the bears and the bulls, a 401 and a 403, and when would I use one or the other? When would it even be available for me to choose? So this is the place to go. Money, Truth, and Life online mastery program. There's a little green button when you go to judycopenbarger.com that gives you access to this online courses. And there are 5 or 6 classes in each course based on the category of finance. So go there. It'll be a great place for you to learn what you need to know. There's also a book if you prefer not to take a video course, but to read a book, Money, Truth, and Life. And you can get that anywhere. If you like Kindle versions, go to Amazon. It's in the bestseller book. There's an author page there, but you can get it anywhere bestsellers are sold. You can go to Target. You can go to online at Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, any of those places that they sell bestsellers. So go there, learn better so you can do better.
Awesome. And folks, again, if you're not following Judy, do so at judycopenbarger.com. All of her social media tags are there as well too. So make sure you follow her and follow her on their YouTube channel as well too. It's been a very it's a heavy subject that we're discussing today because nobody really likes to think about aging parents. You think that your parents are going to be around forever or your siblings are going to be around forever. Mm-hmm. But it's that pre-planning that really can either make or break you, emotionally. And we talked about that in the beginning of the show. When you think back at some of your experiences, some of your client experiences, what's one story or one client that stands out that you were able to help overcome some of these issues?
Yeah. Well, one of the strategies I was just discussing, right now I'm going through, we had a client pass away, longtime client, wonderful. She was like 4 foot nothing, just such a wonderful person. And she passed away just a few months ago. And her daughters are now going through, finishing up the business of her life and taking care of the claims and all of those things. But one thing that she prepared for them in her later years was this Medi-Cal trust that we're discussing, or Medicaid trust. And she wanted to make sure that while she was living, if she needed long-term care, and she had some chronic issues, she was on oxygen and had all kinds of health issues her last 10 years. If she needed that long-term care, she wanted to make sure that they didn't take her 2 homes away to pay for that care or to reimburse against them when she passed away. And it worked beautifully. She was able to get the care she needed. Fortunately, it wasn't to the extent that it could have been. She was able to live at home almost the whole time. And so her 2 daughters were able to each receive a house from her, which she was a realtor back in the day. And that was really important to her that they each had a permanent home with no mortgage on it. And she was able to do that through that planning. Of course, they're grateful. There's still the business of, taking care of all the paperwork and things, but she was able to do that for them. And so the plan worked. It took her a little time and effort and money, to set up years ago, but it went right according to plan, and it's really made their lives so much better.
That's awesome. And it's always great that sometimes in life, what may seem as a tragedy actually ends up being something positive for the family that's left behind as well too.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
awesome. And so we're at the end of our show, and you know what that means, right? I think this is going to be a great challenge. So I'm waiting for this. What do you got?
Well, it's a very broad challenge because every family is different.
Right.
So the first question, if it's going to be a three-part challenge, the first part is to just, kind of take a little moment for assessment. Thinking about your family, the siblings you have, the parents you have, grandparents, in-laws. If there's anyone that you think might be a little bit naked in this area, like there's ways that we can kind of see around the corner. There might be an issue there with healthcare, with living arrangements, with logistics, with emotional care, cognitive care. I can kind of see a storm coming because there's signs. Sometimes we get a little sign, a warning. We see the cloud. Um, I would say the first thing is just to assess what are the potential risks in our family? Who really needs to put some planning in place, and how do we have that happen? I think the second part of the challenge is probably the biggest part. It's having those conversations, you know, talking about the elephant in the room, saying what needs to be said, even if it's not, acceptable in your family to speak of these things. Sometimes culturally we don't talk about it. We don't
Right.
want to jinx anything or bring that negative in, but you got to have the conversations. And that might be a big part of this challenge for you. Have a conversation with your spouse. What about your own planning? What about mom and dad? What about your mom and dad? And just, make sure if there's something that can be done, you at least approached it. You looked at it, you had a conversation, even if it's not the right time to do something about it, it's not, okay to go there. You at least brought it up. Mom and dad, have you done a will? Have you done a trust? Where is it? Do you have everything in order? If something happened to you and you didn't come home Friday night after that date night, or you didn't make it home from that big trip, where's the information we're going to need? Do you have a safe, a desk drawer? Is there a key to a safety deposit box somewhere? Having those conversations sometimes is the biggest part of the challenge. First thing, figure out what needs to be done. Second thing, have those conversations. The third thing is just take action. And maybe it's making a list. Maybe it's calling an expert to help you. Maybe you need to call an attorney or have someone review some documents, or get a hold of your insurance guy and see if what you have is really working for you, or if you need to upgrade something or get rid of something that you have insurance wise. What is it you need to do? You got to take action. It's not enough to just go, yeah, we should have, because then later you're sitting there going, we should have, could have, would have, right? So that's the thing. So find out how you can help, have that conversation, take action. That's your challenge.
Awesome. All right, folks. And if you need a little help with that challenge, make sure you reach out to us, send a message, and we'd love to hear some feedback from you guys as well. Remember, we're here every Tuesday morning at 8, replay on Thursdays at 8 p.m. So make sure you stay tuned, share with your friends. And like I said, if you're just barely joining us now, make sure you watch the beginning of the show. A lot of great content. Judy, have a fantastic week. Always appreciate your wisdom. Any last parting words?
Make it a great week, make it happen, and you can do this.
All right. See you later, Judy. Guys, take care, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Carlos.